We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back here on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Earlier in the show, we were talking the effects of the Iowa caucus. We were talking the swing state blues. And now I'd like to move on to a topic that, let's be fair, Tim Donner, longtime host of this here Liberty Nation Radio show. It's niggling away at the back of everybody's mind. It's there. It's a brain worm. Who will Donald Trump pick as his potential VP? Now, without going straight into predictions, let's talk about. Actually, for those of you listening on the radio here, we have had many discussions about who would be a good Trump VP pick. So let's get into a little bit of first before we go to our predictions. What we think Donald Trump is looking for in a VP. Why don't you start, Tim?
Well, the best way to predict someone's future behavior is to look at their past behavior.
Yep.
And in 2016, Donald Trump, he had a smorgasbord of excellent rivals seeking the nomination that he could have picked many of them to be his number two. He could have picked Ted Cruz. He could have picked Marco Rubio. He could have picked Scott Walker. It was an impressive field. But instead, he went for Mike Pence because he felt he needed to shore up his Christian conservative bona fides. It was an excellent choice, Mark, because that's exactly what Pence really did for him, even though he got embroiled in all that controversy about January 6th later. It wasn't, from a purely political analysis standpoint, it was an excellent pick. And that makes me think he's along the same lines this time, not someone he necessarily has a particular affinity with, but someone who can shore up some of his deficits. Now, to that point, the person that would make the most sense from a strictly raw political standpoint would be Nikki Haley, because she brings women along, and women are the most critical deficit that Trump had in 2020. The women cost him the election, whereas in 2016, they didn't support him by majority, but enough of them supported him to push him across the finish line. So from a pure real politics standpoint, Nikki Haley would be the best choice. But on the other hand, she is viewed with suspicion by the MAGA crowd, whether that's deserved or not, because she has been a more moderate neoconservative Republican in the past. She was also a full-throated, effective UN ambassador for Trump.
Yeah.
So it's hard to see exactly how they would go, but we do know that Haley would lose a lot of Republican votes were she to get the presidential nomination. I'd say DeSantis is not in the running. I would say Vivek Ramaswamy is someone who is of the same mindset and temperament as Trump. He has very carefully developed and created his relationship with Trump so that when the inevitable happened and he had to drop out, he could pivot right to supporting Trump and get into that Trump circle.
Yeah.
Right. So if I had to guess today, I'd say he picked someone from outside the field. And I think Kristi Noem is a name that keeps coming up because she is a conservative woman, an attractive person from the heartland who is sort of the same mindset as Donald Trump. On the other hand, since I'm a political analyst, those words are the most useful for anyone like me. On the other hand, I think that the MAGA crowd understands that the second person in command, that's a different formulation this time, because Trump can only serve one more term, and whoever he puts into that number two spot is now immediately elevated to the de facto or default front runner for 2028. But if Trump loses, that vice presidential candidate is brought down a notch because he or she was the VP candidate on a losing ticket.
Yeah, I think everything you say there makes sense. But you know what? It keeps revolving back around in my head again that this election for Donald Trump, it's not a business as usual election. And he's got his legacy to think about because he only has one term. It's not like a usual president. They'll have their first term. They'll be going into the second term thinking, I'm probably going to be reduced. As a strategist famously said about Barack Obama, after 2014, who cares what he did? You know, nobody cared but he could be a king in like foreign policy circles. But that's not happening now. Now Trump has one term to rebuild his legacy that was essentially taken apart piece by piece from the day Joe Biden got into office.
That's true. And he has a chance to, it's different when you're trying to double down on stuff that's controversial, which is what he would have had to do in 2020. Than when you're kicked out of office and then people can see in retrospect, they can have some perspective. And therefore, he's going to have more political capital if he's elected this time than he would have had in 2020.
Very much so. But I think what he's going to be doing is trying to explain to the voters, and it's not a difficult sell either. That
it isn't.
I've got to have somebody who's MAGA through and through by my side, because when my term finishes, I mean, he might tease the mainstream media crowd by saying, when my term finishes, we'll see about a third. No, he might kid them about that.
He might do that, just like he'll be a dictator for one day.
Sure.
He just can't help but troll the mainstream media.
They keep biting, though. It's their fault. If they stopped biting, he'd stop doing it.
It's true. Absolutely true.
So what he's got to do is he's going to present to his base that, look, we've got to make sure that when I'm done in 4 years' time and everything's beautiful again and we've made America great again, that we can keep America great, he's going to say. And that's why we'll need a MAGA person. Because if he takes, for example, as you point out, Nikki Haley, she would bring in some voters, I think. But I think she would turn off more MAGA votes because, as you rightly point out, she would be the de facto nominee come 2028. And I don't think MAGA voters are ready for, let's be fair, a very neoconservative George W. Bush type presidency once again. I don't think they're ready for that.
Just to play devil's advocate, I could also make the case that, Trump is all about Trump. And his only concern is regaining power. Sure. So when he's done, maybe he doesn't care so much. I mean, he'd like to take a MAGA person, but if he has to take someone like Nikki Haley in order to win, you could make a case that his personality is such that he would take someone who would help him win over someone who might not help as much, but would be more full on MAGA.
You know what?
It's hard to know.
He could always say, thanks for getting me here, VP. But guess what? You're fired. Get them out.
Then again, what he could do is make himself VP so that he could be both president and vice president. And hey, the Democrats want to get rid of the Electoral College, and they want to make D.C. and Guam and Puerto Rico states. So, I mean,
let's not give people ideas, Tim?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Tim, final word on the Trump VP pick.
Well, again, I think it's going to be someone outside of the current realm of candidates. And I do think it will be someone that strengthens one of his perceived deficits demographically, which means I think Tim Scott of South Carolina is a possibility because he's kinder, gentler, and he's black, and he's popular, and he takes away the racist thing. I'd have to say, if I had to guess, if it's a woman, and I think it will be a black person or a woman, that it would be Kristi Noem of South Dakota.
Yeah.
That'd be my dart thrown at the dartboard.
Okay, just because you've been brave enough to put yours out there, I still think he goes with Vivek. Tim Donner,
Okay.
thank you ever so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Anytime, Mark.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.